Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're embarking on a pretty dramatic descent into a realm most of us spend our entire lives running away from, our own hidden inner world. We're going to take a super close look at a staggering discovery made over a century ago. It's something that completely redefines how we understand ourselves, our society, and those mysterious invisible forces that secretly drive human behavior.
Now, think about the crazy paradox of modern life for just a second. We've basically conquered the outside world, right? We have infinite information, endless entertainment, and literally technological marvels right at our fingertips. Yet somehow, we've never been lonelier. We worship productivity, but we've completely lost our sense of purpose. We are absolutely terrified of our own inner darkness. So why is that? Well, it's because we threw away the map. The ancients had mapped the human soul with terrifying precision, and in our frantic race toward modernization, we just tossed those maps aside.
Okay, let's dive into this. Section 1. Jung's Descent into Darkness. To really wrap our heads around this lost map, we gotta look at the guy who basically risked his own sanity to rediscover it. The year is 1913. Following a devastating professional and personal split from his mentor, Sigmund Freud, Carl Jung found himself completely, utterly isolated. And he didn't just experience a career setback here, he plunged into what he called his own personal underworld. For 6 long years, he meticulously documented his spiraling descent into darkness. He recorded vivid visions, heard voices, and conversed with these mysterious figures that felt more real to him than physical reality itself. He poured all of this into a massive, illuminated manuscript that honestly looked like it belonged in a medieval monastery, which we know today as the Red Book.
Now, as you might guess, his remaining colleagues at the time totally thought he was suffering a severe psychotic break. But here's the wild part. He wasn't losing his mind. He was actually finding something that our modern, industrialized society had buried. He was uncovering sophisticated, ancient psychological technologies that had been completely lost to time. Moving right along to Section 2, Decoding the Ancient Map. So what exactly did Jung find buried in all that dust of Gnostic and alchemical texts? Well, he rediscovered this ancient concept called the anima mundi, or the world soul. Jung famously termed it the collective unconscious. But honestly, that clinical phrase barely captures the magic of the whole shebang. The ancients knew that right beneath our individual, everyday consciousness, there's this vast, deep ocean of shared imagery, instincts, and knowledge. It literally connects every single human being across time and space. And the kicker? The ancients didn't just theorize about this realm, they actually lived in it, and they created deeply detailed maps to navigate it safely. The big issue, though, was that Western civilization had totally forgotten how to read these maps. They were written in myth, ritual, and deeply cryptic symbols. Take alchemy, for example. For centuries, modern scholars just laughed at alchemists. They dismissed their work as primitive, failed chemistry, delusional attempts to turn physical lead into gold, which usually just ended with someone accidentally drinking toxic mercury. But Jung decoded it. He realized the alchemists were actually unconsciously describing profound inner transformation. It wasn't chemistry at all. It was a highly sophisticated psychological manual disguised as chemistry. And this brilliantly illustrates the true genius of the alchemical process. The lead represented the heavy, unconscious, suffering state of the untransformed human soul. The gold wasn't literal, spendable wealth. It represented enlightenment, wholeness, a state Jung called individuation. So all those bizarre medieval images of dragons and kings dissolving in acid, that was actually a step-by-step guide for turning psychological suffering into conscious wholeness. But guys, this is where Jung's discovery gets truly staggering. Jung noticed that these exact same symbolic patterns weren't just gathering dust in 15th century manuscripts. No way. They were actively appearing in the dreams of his modern 20th century patients. People who had never read a single word of ancient mysticism were dreaming up figures completely identical to those found in 2nd century texts. This absolutely proved that these ancient archetypes weren't just learned cultural constructs. They are inherited, innate psychological structures in the human brain. They are alive inside every single one of us right now. Which brings us to a pretty heavy realization in Section 3, the cost of ignorance. Because look, just ignoring these massive psychological forces doesn't magically make them go away. When a culture stops acknowledging them, they just go underground. The repressed need for transcendence, it returns as rampant substance abuse. That denied warrior energy, it comes roaring back as senseless violence. If we don't engage these forces consciously through meaningful symbols, they possess us unconsciously through symptoms and suffering. And the ancients warned us about this. They knew that ignoring the depths of the soul leads to total destruction. Today, we're seeing it in epidemics of depression and anxiety, mass delusions, and even ecological collapse.
These aren't just random, isolated problems. They are severe symptoms of archetypal starvation. So the crucial takeaway here is this. We've built a world that heavily feeds the ego but completely starves the soul. And honestly, the soul is taking its revenge. Jung saw this happen on a massive, catastrophic scale in his own lifetime. He analyzed the rise of Nazi Germany not just as a political or economic crisis, but as an instance of collective archetypal possession. He described how the Germanic god of storm and frenzy had unconsciously seized millions of people who mistakenly thought they were just modern rationalists. When an entire civilization becomes unconscious, it becomes incredibly vulnerable to possession by some seriously destructive forces.
Let's look at how we got here in Section 4, the death of sacred ritual. So how on earth did we become so vulnerable? Well, it really comes down to this massive cultural void we've created for ourselves. The ancients totally understood that human beings need a lot more than just food and shelter. We desperately need initiation. Traditional societies provided elaborate sacred rituals for birth, coming of age, and death, specifically to guide people through massive psychological transitions involving symbolic death and rebirth. But modern culture, we've abandoned almost all of it. Now we're just left with graduation parties and retirement cakes, which are really just hollow echoes of what used to be profound psychological support systems.
And because we have no real initiation into adulthood anymore, you see youth turning to some pretty dangerous coping mechanisms. Gangs, extreme sports, substance abuse, just to fill that void. And when adults hit a natural period of psychological death and rebirth, what we call a midlife crisis, we don't guide them. Instead of a vision quest, we just go out and buy a sports car. Or even worse, we medicalize it, we pathologize it. We treat it as an illness that needs to be cured, rather than a sacred threshold that should be honored and explored.
But there is a way forward. Section 5, the path to individuation.
Let's move to and see how this builds, because Jung didn't just diagnose the illness, right? He actually gave us a brilliant, practical framework for those of us willing to wake up. He called it individuation, which means recognizing that you are so much more than just your conscious ego. Step 1 is facing the shadow, those dark, denied parts of yourself. Step 2 is integrating your anima or animus, the contrasexual energies living within you. And Step 3 is achieving conscious wholeness by connecting directly with these ancient archetypal patterns. You literally have to descend into the darkness to find the light.
Now, obviously, we can't just hit rewind and live exactly like our ancient ancestors did. That's not realistic. But we absolutely cannot survive if we keep ignoring what they knew about the human soul. Jung's ultimate genius was providing a modern framework for an ancient journey. We really have to learn to honor both our rational mind, which is an incredibly powerful tool, and our deeply symbolic, instinctual nature. Let's bring this into the real world with Section 6, the alchemist's path, a guide for empaths.
So, you're probably wondering, how do you actually apply all this incredibly deep work into your own life today? Well, if you're feeling the emptiness of just surface-level living, there is a fantastic resource specifically designed to help you navigate this. It's called The Alchemist's Path by Surreal Mind. It operates on this really beautiful premise that empaths aren't broken, they are alchemists in progress. This guide provides step-by-step perception training and Jung-based boundary drills to help you turn all that overwhelm into crystal-clear wisdom. It's a beautifully designed 236-page downloadable ebook, and it even includes 3 exclusive chapter videos to really deepen your lessons. You can start your training right now at thesurrealmind.com to learn how to feel deeply while still thinking clearly. The ancients essentially left us a map, and Carl Jung spent his entire life translating it so we wouldn't have to walk blindly in the dark. These archetypes are operating inside you right now, whether you acknowledge them or not. So I'm going to leave you with this final, crucial question. Will you choose to step into your own underworld and engage your darkness consciously, or will you continue to run and let it possess you unconsciously? The choice is entirely yours. Begin the great work. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I'll see you next time.